Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast by myself once more, Josh Lander, bringing you Wednesday night's NBA one-game slate as we've got the Eastern Conference Finals match up for Game 1 there between the Celts and the Heat. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. I've also got video up for you guys about Tuesday night's Western Conference Finals game as well, Game 1 there. Also have a best bets video with some future stuff and some series prices, looking at these two series and some futures championships and things like that we can get ahead of. So there's a third video up this week about that stuff as well. Make sure you check that out. And also head to thelines.com. As I always tell you, you've got plenty of great written content up there this week. And that odds finder tool, a nice little chart. You can see all the odds available to you from the different sports books that are giving us bets this postseason, and then find the best odds. Choose those. Let's go ahead and jump right into the first best bet I'm talking about from this game, and it is the Heat to cover. It's at 7.5 now. It's a minus 110 wherever you're finding it. Would bet that down probably to about minus 6.5. It's gone down already from plus 8.5 down to the plus 7.5 there. So yeah, if you wanted it at the plus 6.5, if it comes down to that at some point, not the worst bet in the world, but I'd still like it at the 8. I actually took it at the 9 right away. But by the time everyone's seeing this, it's going to be at least 7.5, I imagine. So I'll give you guys that one. I just like the Heat on in this series in general. I talked about a little bit of money on them to win it at plus 400. It's the best odds for anybody to win a series at this point between the four teams left. And there's just, I think it's mispriced to be honest. I mean, maybe there is the numbers say that the likelihood of the Heat with this roster can beat the Celtics, in a 7 game series. Maybe you're saying that's pretty fair, plus 400, because it's not that likely. But we've just seen them do it. We just saw them do it 2 years ago. We saw them take them to the brink of Game 7 last year as well, where Jimmy, really just needed to hit that above the break 3, and they would have been in the finals instead of the Celtics with another sort of ragtag band of misfits that are playing alongside Jimmy at this point, outside of really Bam. It's just a bunch of guys they cobbled together with a ton of undrafted free agents and the like. So they're 3-3 on the road in these playoffs. They are losing those games just by 2 points on average, 1.5 points on average. And they've won the opening game of their last 4 playoff series, including last year against the Celtics. They won that Game 1 pretty handily, actually, and they won it with a lot of points and a lot of pace. Won at 118 to 107. They did get blown out in Game 2. That was in Miami as well, I should be clear, but not that big a deal depending on where they play. Like I said, 3-3 on the road in the playoffs, and really at least one of those games, if you're not two, both Game 2s, Miami just sort of forfeited with no Jimmy Butler really playing in Game 2 of the last series against the Knicks. I believe he played in Game 2 against the Bucks, but I don't believe he played very much as it was a complete blowout. He might not have even played. Not relevant because I feel really good about them in Game 1. So that's kind of where I'm starting. I feel even better, to be honest, and probably should have started with this, but over 210, I feel really good about. That's minus 110 on DraftKings as well. I think I'm going 1.5 units on that. And I would even bet this up to, about 211. That's kind of where I start to feel a little bit less comfortable. But there's only one game that went under this total between these teams in the 4 matchups this season. That one had no Jimmy Butler, no Jaylen Brown, no Marcus Smart, and no Al Horford. The other 3 games averaged 235 points per game in those. And obviously there was a massive one in there where it was about 255 points scored. But looking at the way that these two teams play in these playoffs, Miami versus Milwaukee in round 1 played at 102 pace. Boston versus Atlanta in round 1 played at 102 pace, 101.7 or whatever. Then you look at the next round, they're playing New York and Philly, respectively. Miami against New York, Boston against Philly. Both their paces go down to 93 per game in those in those series, right? So that's just about who they're playing. I mean, Boston is going to continue to shoot and play with a decent pace, probably close to 98, which is what these two teams played at when they played each other this season, was about 97 and a half. I think you can expect it to continue being around that in this series, closer to what they were when they played the Hawks and the Bucks, two very fast-paced teams. So they're both so heavily reliant on three-point shooting at this point. Obviously, the Celtics we know, and Miami as well, that there's going to be some variance, but I do think there's going to be some similarities to last year's series where there's a few blowouts, but one team's getting 120, 122, and the other one's barely getting to 110, and it's not that close, but that's because one team has it, one team doesn't. But we can rely on there to be a lot of shots going up from deep and a good amount of pace as they just kind of keep going. And both these teams are basically, not basically, they are 100% given the directive by both their coaches. if you're open within the flow of the offense, pull it. It's a lot of drive, kick, or swing, and get open on some cuts. They both do some pretty nice stuff on the low cuts closer to the baseline as well, and those picks and screens that they set there. So there's going to be a lot of shooters looking and just running around and looking to get open with a lot of ball movement from both these teams, and I think that's going to stay the case in game one especially. I think this is too low. Maybe it's a more reasonable number for when we get to game 4 or game 5, and it's even later in the series, even later in the season, and then we start to see a 210 total be pretty fair. But I think this one's closer to like 220. You can probably get some pretty good, you can get some pretty good juice there if you want to juke the total and take like an alt total. And at that point, you can get things like for this game to go to 215. And now you're looking at closer to about plus 185 on your money for that, for 5 more points there. I think that's pretty reasonable the way that these teams play in pace. And but neither of them really are defending the 3-pointer well. We know Philly and the Knicks don't shoot a large volume of threes, but in the first round, once again, Milwaukee and Atlanta shoot a ton of threes, and they gave up. Miami gave up to Milwaukee 15.6 threes on 38%. Boston gave up 14 threes on 37% against Atlanta in that round 1, and I think we can expect a little bit more of that. So, all right, let's move on to pick number 3. Max Strus is my guy, and I'm going back to the well, as we all know. 11.5 points. This hit a ton in the last round versus the Knicks, and it just sort of became apparent that Spoelstra trusts him a lot, and so I can get over 11.5 points once again, which was the low end for Strus. We saw it get up to 12.5, even 13 at one point for him in the series against the Knicks because of how well he was playing there. So I'm going back to the over 11.5 because I can also get it at minus 115 on FanDuel, taking that for a unit. Another great matchup. Like I said, Spo knows he's got a guy that's playing defense and can rebound on top of being a shooter, and they're sparse, right? In terms of the guys they have in their rotation that are big bodies right now. Bam is their biggest player at like 6'9". Cody Zeller is getting minutes at this point because Haywood Highsmith is not really ready for this, and Zeller is an even bigger body they needed against the Knicks there. We'll see how much they need him. If Rob Will gets minutes, Cody Zeller's probably coming in. But the point here is that for Strus, he's going to be out there because he's basically playing power forward a lot in the starting lineup, small forward, if you will, because you've got Jimmy out there alongside Bam. But really, Strus is going to be out there for the 30 minutes he played against the Knicks in that series as well, I believe. He also played 28 minutes per game in the series versus Miami last year in the Eastern Conference Finals in a similar scenario. 14 points per game last round versus the Knicks, and really, really good numbers there. Shooting the ball a ton in his last 5 versus the Knicks in the last 5 games of that series. 19% usage rate, pulling 8.6 threes per game, which is best on the team, number 1 most on the team at that time, still hitting them at a 35% clip. That's 3 threes exactly that he's making in each game. If he's going to get 9 points off of threes, I really like him to get 2 free throws and at least 3 or 4 attempts around the rim. That should get us to about 13, 14 points, which is, like I said, what he's been averaging. In the last 4 games that he saw at least 30 minutes, he's averaging against the Celtics, he's averaging 14 points per game in 34 minutes. He's gotten really good minutes in those 4. Like I said, averaging 34, gets to the 14 at that point. He'll probably be around 29, 30 in this game. Maybe he gets a few more minutes. I don't think you can afford to play him 25 or 26 like Spo has a couple times, but it seemed like in those games, they weren't really trying at that point anyway, right? And Spo was happy to get Duncan Robinson some floor minutes to get him some rhythm because he was bad at first, had a nice 5 for 10 game from 3 to Duncan in a game that Strus sat for a lot because it was the game that Jalen Brunson took over and he ended up losing. So my point here is when he gets the 30 minutes and he gets it when they're trying to win, then he should be good for 14 in this game. Maybe you want an alt, you can get an alt line of him to get 14 plus points on FanDuel. That does get you up to about plus 185, 186 on FanDuel. They like those weird numbers sometimes. So there's some pretty good reason to feel good about Strus doing that as well. Finishing things off here with Jason Tatum. And I'm going back to the same well that I've been going back to with him, which is the board, because I love the fact that we're not seeing as much Rob Will, right, in these playoffs. I don't know if that's going to change in this one, but why would it change against, why would Missoula start playing Rob Will more against the Heat, who are smaller than the Celtics? I don't know. Obviously, Doc did a really good job of playing Rob Will off the floor, and I think Spo should just take that page out of his book. And the way he played him off the floor was as soon as Rob Will comes in, PJ Tucker's out, George Niang is in. As soon as, or whomever is out there that they need to switch up the matchup so that they have a 3-point shooter, that Rob Will has to guard, which pulls him away from the rim and makes him completely useless. And that's why his minutes continue to dwindle. And I think that's a good thing for Tatum, who needs to get 10 boards. That's minus 120 on DraftKings, going a full unit. He recorded that in 5 of the 7 games versus Philly. He's recorded a double-double in 8 of his last 11 in these playoffs. He's averaging 10.5 boards versus Miami over his last 7 versus them. And that's because a lot of what we saw with Horford, spending his time boxing out Capella, spending his time in the first round, spending his time boxing out Mitchell Robinson, Joel in the second round there versus the 76ers. And that leaves Tatum open to go get a ton of boards. And what do he have in the last one? 13 or whatever, and alongside his 51 points. We took him to get 8 there. Let's not even worry about it. Let's just say 10. I feel better about the 10 now because of the pace of this game, that it should be much faster than the Philly series where it slowed all the way down to 93. Like I said, should be back up to about 98. Gives you a few more opportunities for those boards. And Miami's chucking, dude. Like their directive is clear. Keep the offense flowing, and if you're one of the 2 or 3 shooters on our team, in terms of Strus and Vincent and Duncan, as soon as that ball is in your hands, shoot it. And if that's the case, there's gonna be a ton of shots. There's gonna be a ton of missed shots because the Heat are also a good offensive rebounding team and want to give themselves an opportunity to get more offensive boards. So they'll just be pulling the ball more. And Tatum should be good for 10 boards, like I said, which he continues to do throughout these playoffs, and definitely also does against a shorter Heat team where he'll be the tallest dude on the floor alongside Al Horford until Rob Will gets out there. He's the biggest dude out there. So I think there's good reason to think he can get the 10 rebounds in this one. And that is all the time I have for you guys for game 1 of this Eastern Conference Finals. Like and subscribe to that page. Like I said, got a series prices video for you along with some championship futures we're looking at. Got the Western Conference Finals game 1 on Tuesday night video for you, and this one. So until I see you next, happy betting.